Hello, welcome to the Affaircare podcast. My name is Cindy Taylor. I'm the co-founder here of Affaircare, along with my dear hubby David Taylor, who is the man behind the camera, and also the man who does all the little special effects and adds links and whatnot on the videos. We are in a little series that we're working on, and this is, I think, the third one in the series. It's the tools that you can use for reconciliation. And we wanted to specifically go through each one of the tools, how to use them, and why they would be important in your reconciliation. Today's edition of the podcast, we're going to be discussing the third most important tool, honestly, is the Love Extinguishers Quiz. Now, the first quick thing, if you don't know what a love extinguisher is, I'm going to put the link right here to our articles page. And on our articles page, we have an article that's called Love Extinguishers. What are they? And it essentially will tell you all about what love extinguishers are and what does that term mean and everything. So that way you can go look there rather than having to have me repeat all that now. And then to take the quiz together, I'm going to put the little link right here. And this is the link for the quizzes page, and obviously it's the third one down. First is Myers-Briggs, second, Love Language, third one is the Love Extinguishers Quiz. You can take that quiz. The idea is that you take the quiz thinking of what your spouse does, and your spouse takes the quiz thinking of what you do, and then you share with each other. I'm just going to say right now, one of the biggest traps people fall into is it can get really hurtful and blamey. So you're going to want to go at this as gently as you can with each other. Pick a time where you're going to, we agree that we're going to share this and be honest. And sometimes it's a little easier to just hand them the printed copy of what you thought rather than speaking out loud, because hearing it can be a little bit hurtful. Okay? Another way that you can also use the quiz, and this is the way I intend to discuss it today, is to go through the different categories, if you will, of the love extinguishers and kind of say to yourself, do I do this? And you want to do it like that because a part of what's going to heal you guys as a couple is going to be both of you. And I mean this sincerely, looking at yourself and saying, could be I need to work on that. Could be I have this problem and I need to change. What we have run into a lot is people that say that they don't want to look at themselves. They only want to point the finger at their spouse. But then when we do find people who are willing to look at themselves, the next thing we run into is people who, well, yeah, I'm a scorekeeper, but I don't really want to change. So in this instance, although it would be helpful to hear what your spouse maybe thinks that you do, by the same token, it's also really helpful for self-examination, to look at the man in the mirror and say, am I guilty of this? And if so, am I willing to change? How can I do that? In case you have missed it, in a really brief description, a love extinguisher is the sort of an action that you would do within your marriage that would put out the flame of love with your spouse. So for example, these are, I also call them sometimes like an evil spirit or a, and I don't mean that like in a woo spiritual kind of way. I just mean it's just this part of you that is harmful and harming your marriage rather than the kind that's building love and making your marriage more like you want it to be. That's what a love extinguisher is. And we have sort of focused in on the 7 areas of neglect. And then, again, I don't think I'm going to go through and reread exactly what's on the pages, the Love Extinguisher page, because that's for you to do and for you to look at. But one of the things that at least I've found helpful for me is that when the two of you agree to sit down and be honest with each other, it's hard to look at your spouse in the face and say, well, I kind of think you're not very forgiving. That's very difficult. And it's also, on the receiving it, it's difficult to hear that someone thinks you are not forgiving. But what happens a lot of times, because of our own selves, we want to be, like, sort of defend ourselves. We might look at it and say, Scorekeeper? Oh, I don't do that. I'm cool. Fault finder? Nah, not really. I'm pretty cool. But then here, come to find out, our spouse thinks that we do. So this is why we do the exchange part. And you have to say to yourself, I'm going to put a little bit of a barrier, not like you're excluding someone, but more like so that I'm a little bit toughened, like that little bit of a hardened shell, and be ready, because I know I'm going to get a couple hits that are going to hurt me. And I'm going to, no matter what they say, I'm going to respond with, thank you for being honest. I'll think about what you said. Because that encourages them to continue to be honest with you. Now, if what they said is 100% patently, no way, Jose, still say to them, thank you for being honest. I will think about what you said. In addition, also actually think about what they said. If what they said was 100% patently, no way, Jose, it's false, give yourself permission to think to yourself, could it possibly be that I have this issue? In an instance of reconciliation, the reason you need to do this particular quiz is twofold. One is for examining yourself. Because in real life, if you continue on your marriage the way that it was, then that was a marriage that was vulnerable to and led to adultery. We don't want that. So, in order to change the outcome, you have to change what was happening. So, while Einstein had that little quote that says that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. If you want a different outcome, you have to do things differently. So, that's one thing. You want to look at your own self, and a lot of times, through the power of conviction, you can say to yourself, wow, you know what? I hadn't really thought about it, but I guess I really am kind of a scorekeeper. Well, okay. That's not to say that's an okay thing or you should continue doing it, but you've identified that as an issue for you, and maybe you can be more aware of it and start to think, well, search online, how do I stop being a scorekeeper? Email us, we'll help you. See what I mean? The point being, you need to change that. And also that will then change hopefully change the outcome in your marriage, because when you scorekeep, you're putting out the fire of love. You're putting it out, and pretty soon your spouse will resent you. And the other reason that you do the Love Extinguisher Quiz is because part of the biggest part of the healing process really is learning to be honest with each other when it's hard. Okay? Now, almost anybody can be honest when it's easy. Hey, how do I look in this outfit? You look great. And they really do look great. You know what I mean? Anybody can do that. That's easy. But what's more difficult is learning to be honest when you've got something to say that's a little bit scary to say, or hard to say, or you think you're going to make your spouse mad, or you think you might get yelled at about it. When you can be honest in those times, that builds trust back, but also it rebuilds your foundation of honesty in your relationship. So, in this instance, we're going to practice that by being honest. If you honestly think that your spouse is neglecting you physically and doesn't hold you, doesn't touch you, doesn't give you hugs and kisses, and withholds sexual fulfillment, that is something that needs to be addressed, dealt with, and changed. Because if they do not address, deal with, and change that, then the marriage will be continuously damaged, right? If you think your spouse has abandoned their physical attractiveness and it's starting to turn you off, you can't keep ignoring it, or eventually the resentment will burn like a gall in your stomach and it will destroy your marriage. So you have to be honest. So in this instance, we've done the physical, or the personality, and hopefully, learned a few things about each other that were, that's kind of a neat discovery, right? You've learned the love languages, and you've got maybe to practice a little bit at doing a few love languagey things their way, right? So that they hear it. Now we're going to take a pretty big step. This is a pretty tough one. Do the Love Extinguishers Quiz. It is a little bit long, so I'm just warning you. Print it out, and then you answer truthfully, do you think your spouse does that, right? Does that make sense? And then, like I said, I think probably the easiest way to do it is just to swap papers. Because sometimes, if you're a wife who's felt hurt and hurt and hurt by your husband, and because of that, you don't really hug and kiss him, it can really hurt, again, to hear, you don't hug and kiss me nearly enough. And that's not the goal here. The goal here is not to start a fight. The goal here is not to make things worse again between you, but rather to bring some, let's face reality and stop ducking it. Let's stop putting our head in the sand, and let's bring some of this out to light and see if we can address it. Now, if you go through the quiz and you discover, we kind of identify 7 areas that a person can be neglectful, and you think all 7 of the areas are your spouse is just horrible, chances are pretty good that there's something else at play. So, for example, you might still be in some affair fog if you were the disloyal spouse. For example, you might still be extremely angry at your spouse for the adultery if you're the loyal spouse, that kind of thing. So we're not talking about piling on a bunch of blamey, we're talking about, be honest. Do you think maybe that your spouse engages in disrespectful judgment toward you? And that is to say, they judge you without actually ever respecting you and your thoughts and kind of hearing you. Then eventually that will need to be talked to. So hopefully you take the quiz, and the goal here is to find, I would say, maybe the top 2 or possibly 3 that are like, these really bug me the worst, and let's address them. And ideally also kind of go into it with the view that you're going to hear from your spouse, maybe the top 2 or 3 things that really bug them, and try to keep an open heart and say, am I willing to address these things for the sake of our marriage and our family? So, for example, let's say the top 2 that your spouse says that, I'm a female person, so I'm going to start from the point of a wife, and the husband just told me that I have abandoned my physical attractiveness, and I have some hidden spending or overspending, okay? And he says those are the 2 things that are really killing the love the worst for him. So I hear those things, and naturally I'm going to feel a little bit bad about that, because I'm going to feel kind of ugly, and I'm going to feel like I can't go out and spend all the, get all the little shoes and things I want. But now I also know that those are the things that are killing the love the fastest for him, and I can say, yeah, I actually have kind of let myself go a little bit, and I do, instead of looking if I can afford something first, I buy it and then go, whoops, couldn't afford it. So what I am willing to do is, I'm willing to work on putting on my makeup and doing up my hair every day, and I'm willing to say to him, if I do want, let's say, some new outfits or something so I can look a little bit better, say, I will go shopping with you, and you will okay every outfit that I do buy so that I look a little nicer. This way, we're kind of accomplishing 2 goals. One goal is, I will do a few things, like you kind of, do you want my hair a certain color? Do you want a certain kind of makeup that you sort of like the best? And you're working together on that thing. You're not just, like, you hear this disrespectful thing, and then you're kind of like taking it personally, and fine, I'll wear it. You know what I mean? You work on it together. And then number 2, same thing with the financial one. You would say, well, let's go shopping together. Let's pick a couple outfits you think look good on me, and I will wear them for you. And you will prove them so that we're not financially overspending. Maybe the person that gave that request, the spouse, could say, we have a budget of X amount of dollars, and that's how much we can spend. That's the limit. There you go. You've addressed those 2 issues, and B, you've worked on them together as a team rather than having them split you apart, which is what they're doing now. They're splitting you apart now. Okay, likewise, you can imagine if you're a husband, and let's say the neglect is ongoing unemployment and angry explosions. Okay, so she tells you this. Yes, at first you're going to be hurt. You're going to feel like, probably feel angry. But what you want to do is to say, okay, how can I work on these things? The ongoing unemployment. Okay, I can file for unemployment. I can work 8 to 5. I'm going to be filing resumes with people, etc. You get the drift, right? So this is what you want to do, is to work on them together. Because once your spouse has said to you, angry explosions are the things that are, destroying the love the quickest, then the reverse on that would be, okay, I'm willing to work on that. What would help resolve that for you? How can we as a team tackle this issue? And it's not just me working on it. We are working on it together. And I'm not saying that if a spouse is angry and they're explosive and they're abusive, that then it is the other person's fault, or that they are involved, if you will, in the abuse part, the choice to abuse. But rather, okay, on his side, he might have to attend anger management classes, but she has to say, every single time you're abusive, I'm going to call it by name. That's how I'm going to do this, so that we end this cycle. So we're working on it together. Okay, so that's the conclusion of our podcast for this week, and we have 2 more to go. Next week will be the Love Kindlers, which is a whole lot more fun, frankly. We get to find out what it is that kind of percolates the love and makes the flame blaze. And then the final one will be a kind of newer one we've been just starting to talk about. It's REBT, which stands for Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy. And we'll be going through that and explaining how to do it, but also why it's important, so that you can reconcile and grow in your marriage. So, all right, thank you so much for watching the podcast, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.